Grandma Ruth's hands trembled as she gripped my wrists across the engagement party's elaborately decorated table. Her eyes, usually warm and gentle, burned with an intensity I'd never seen before. The string quartet's melody faded into background noise as she leaned forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "The shadows, Lydia. They linger behind him like hungry wolves. I'm Lydia, and this was supposed to be the happiest day of my life." Instead, my grandmother had just turned my perfect engagement party into something from a Gothic novel. "Grandma, please," I whispered back, conscious of the curious glances from nearby guests. "This isn't the time." "Time is exactly what we're running out of, dear." Her grip tightened. "I've seen what lies ahead. That man, he's not what he seems." The crystal champagne glasses clinked around us as Mason, my fiancé, worked the room with his signature charm. I watched him laugh with my brother Sam, their shoulders touching as they shared some private joke. Mason caught my eye and winked, his perfect smile making my heart flutter despite Grandma's warning. "He's good, isn't he?" Grandma Ruth's words cut through my thoughts. "Making everyone believe. Your brother doesn't see it yet, but he will. The doubt's already there, like a seed waiting to sprout." I pulled my hands away. "That's enough. Mason's done nothing but support me in my business. He believes in me." "Oh, child." She shook her head slowly. "He believes in what you can give him. There's a difference." Mother appeared behind Grandma Ruth, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Mom, you're upsetting Lydia. This is her special day." "Julia, you feel it too. Don't deny it." Grandma turned to face my mother. "The way he looked at Lydia's financial statements last week, like a fox eyeing the henhouse." My chest tightened. "You're being ridiculous. Mason's a financial advisor. Of course he'd be interested in my business records." A little too interested." Sam's voice joined in as he approached our table. His earlier jovial expression had vanished. "Did you know he asked me about your investment portfolio yesterday?" "He's my fiancé," I snapped, louder than intended. Several heads turned our way. "We're planning a future together. These things matter." Nate, my accountant and oldest friend, appeared at my elbow with fresh champagne. His timing was perfect, or terrible, depending on how you looked at it. "Everything okay here?" "Perfectly fine," I said, but my voice cracked. Just my family sharing their delightful opinions about my future husband. Nate's eyes met mine, and I saw something there. Concern, maybe? He'd been oddly quiet since I'd announced the engagement 2 months ago. "The shadows are gathering," Grandma Ruth announced, her voice carrying across nearby tables. "Mark my words, there will be tears before winter's end." Mason chose that moment to return, sliding his arm around my waist. "What's this about shadows?" His laugh was easy, confident. "Surely we're celebrating light and love today." I felt Grandma Ruth's eyes boring into us both. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees as she stood, her small frame somehow filling the space between us. "Behind that smile of yours," she said, each word sharp as glass, "there's nothing but darkness. And my Lydia, she's too precious for your games." Mason's arm tightened around me. "Mrs. Thompson, I understand you're protective of Lydia, but—" "No, you don't understand," she cut him off. "But you will. When everything you've built comes crashing down, remember this moment. Remember I saw you coming." She turned and walked away, leaving a wake of whispers and shocked faces. Mother hurried after her, while Sam stood frozen, his expression unreadable. Mason laughed it off, but his hand trembled slightly against my hip. "Well, that was dramatic. Shall we cut the cake?" I nodded mechanically, but as we walked toward the elaborate 3-tiered cake, I couldn't shake the chill that had settled in my bones. Because for just a moment, when Grandma Ruth had made her proclamation, I'd seen something flicker across Mason's face. Fear. And Grandma Ruth had never, not once in her 78 years, been wrong about these things. The morning after the engagement party, Sam cornered me in my workshop. I was sorting through a shipment of raw gemstones, but my hands kept fumbling the pieces. 3 sapphires had already slipped through my fingers, scattering across the wooden workbench. We need to talk about Mason, Sam said, closing the door behind him. If this is about Grandma's performance last night, it's not just that. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. Remember how Mason said he played Division I football at Stanford? I set down a particularly valuable emerald. Of course, he was their starting quarterback for 2 seasons. Funny thing about that. Sam's voice had that edge he used when dismantling someone's financial strategy. I called my college roommate. He's coaching there now. Mason Carter never played for Stanford. Not a single game. The emerald rolled off the workbench. I didn't move to catch it. That's impossible. He has photos. From high school games, if you look closely. Lydia, I've been digging. His investment firm? It's registered to a P.O. box in Delaware. The office address he gave you? It's a virtual workspace that anyone can rent by the hour. My throat felt like sandpaper. You investigated my fiancé? Someone had to. He leaned against my workbench. Did you know he's been asking around about taking out a business loan against your company's assets? The room tilted slightly. He wouldn't do that without discussing it with me first. Wouldn't he? Sam's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression darkening. Mason's mother is here to see you. Megan? I hadn't expected to see her until the wedding planning started. Did you tell her where my workshop was? She found it herself. Sam's hand rested on my shoulder. Want me to stay? I shook my head. Whatever this was, I needed to handle it myself. Megan Carter swept in like an autumn storm, all designer clothes and perfectly maintained composure. But something was off. Her hands wouldn't stop fidgeting with her purse strap. Lydia, dear. She didn't quite meet my eyes. We need to discuss Mason. Sam squeezed my shoulder before leaving, closing the door with a soft click that felt oddly final. Is everything all right? I asked, though nothing felt all right anymore. No. Megan's composure cracked. It's happening again, and I won't let another family be destroyed. What's happening again? She pulled out a manila envelope. These are records of Mason's previous engagement. To Caroline Weber 2 years ago. Her family lost everything. My legs gave out. I sank onto my work stool, the envelope heavy in my hands. He convinced her family to invest in a tech startup. Megan continued, her voice hollow. The company never existed. By the time they realized, Mason was gone, along with $3 million. The workshop's walls seemed to close in. Why are you telling me this? Because your grandmother reminded me of Caroline's mother. She had the same suspicions, the same warnings. We ignored her. Megan's eyes filled with tears. I've enabled him for too long, covered his tracks, made excuses. But watching him target you, seeing your family try to protect you, I can't do it anymore. My phone buzzed. A text from Mason. Great news about that investment opportunity. Need to meet ASAP. Bringing paperwork. He's already starting, Megan whispered, reading the message over my shoulder. First comes the charm, then the business opportunity, then... The workshop door opened. Mason stood there, his perfect smile faltering as he saw his mother. Mom? His voice carried an edge I'd never heard before. What are you doing here? The right thing, finally. She straightened her spine, years of guilt falling away. I'm telling Lydia everything. Mason's smile vanished completely. In that moment, I saw what Grandma Ruth had warned about. The shadows behind his eyes, the darkness beneath the charm. You really shouldn't have done that, he said softly, and somehow those quiet words carried more menace than any shout. I clutched the manila envelope, my engagement ring suddenly feeling like a shackle. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Or maybe that was just the sound of my world crumbling. Sam's footsteps pounded up the workshop stairs. Mason's hand moved toward his jacket pocket, and I realized with crystal clarity that this was only the beginning of what Grandma Ruth had foreseen. The shadows weren't just lingering anymore. They were closing in. The manila envelope sat unopened on my desk for 3 days. Every morning, I'd trace its edges with trembling fingers, but couldn't bring myself to look inside. Until Nate showed up with that haunted look in his eyes. We need to talk about your business accounts, he said, setting his laptop down. Something's wrong. I pushed Caroline Weber's envelope aside. Define wrong. Someone's been accessing your financial records. Multiple login attempts from unfamiliar IP addresses. His fingers flew across the keyboard. And there's this. He turned the screen toward me. A series of pending transactions appeared. Transfer authorizations I'd never seen before. That's impossible! I leaned closer. I never approved these. They're scheduled for tomorrow morning. 5 separate transfers, totaling just under $2 million. Nate's voice cracked. To an offshore account. My engagement ring caught the light, mocking me. Mason has my passwords. I know. Nate wouldn't meet my eyes. He called me yesterday, asking about expediting international transfers. Said you were planning to expand the business overseas. The envelope suddenly felt like it was burning through my desk. I ripped it open, documents spilling across my keyboard. Police reports, bank statements, newspaper clippings, all telling the same story. Caroline Weber's family jewelry business, gutted from the inside out. My phone buzzed. Mason's text lit up the screen. Dinner tonight? Have exciting news about our future. Call Sam, I told Nate. And my grandmother, we need... The office door opened. Mason stood there, earlier than expected, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Sweetheart? His gaze flickered between me and the scattered documents. What's all this? Funny story, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I've been learning about your previous engagement. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Mason's smile vanished like it had never existed. My mother, he said flatly. She's always been unstable. Whatever she told you. Caroline Weber's father died in prison. I cut him off. After taking the fall for financial fraud. Fraud you orchestrated. He took a step forward. Nate shifted, placing himself between us. You don't understand. Mason's voice turned silky. Caroline's family was already corrupt. I simply exposed what was already there. But you and me were different, special. The transfer authorizations, I said. Were those special too? Something dangerous flashed across his face. Business opportunities require quick decisions. I was only trying to help. By stealing my life's work? By securing our future. He moved closer, that familiar charm sliding back into place. Think about it, Lydia. With your business acumen and my connections, we could build an empire. Built on what? Lies? Theft? Built on trust. His hand reached for mine. Don't let your family's paranoia ruin what we have. Your grandmother, your brother, they're afraid of change, of success. The worst part was, for a moment, I almost believed him. That's when I understood how Caroline Weber's family had fallen for it too. You're right about one thing, I said, sliding off my engagement ring. This is about trust. The mask slipped. Just for a second, but long enough to see the coldness underneath. Don't do anything you'll regret, he said softly. Too late. I nodded to Nate, who hit a key on his laptop. I just reversed all those transfer authorizations and copied every suspicious transaction to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Mason moved so fast I barely saw it, but Sam moved faster, appearing in the doorway behind him. Touch my sister, Sam said quietly, and find out what happens next. Mason's laugh was hollow. You have no idea what you're dealing with. No! Grandma Ruth's voice carried from behind Sam. But we're about to find out. She stepped into view, holding a phone. On its screen was a video call with Megan Carter. I'm sorry, Mason, his mother said. I've told them everything, about Caroline, about the others. It's over. The shadows Grandma Ruth had warned about weren't just visible now. They were consuming him from the inside out. As Mason's carefully constructed world began to crumble, I saw the truth. Sometimes the most dangerous monsters wear the most convincing masks. And sometimes, the only way to fight darkness is to drag it into the light. Mason vanished after the confrontation. But his ghost lingered in every notification on my phone. 3 days of silence, then a text that made my blood freeze. Remember that investment contract you signed last month? I called Nate immediately. Found him already waiting outside my office, pale-faced and clutching a stack of papers. "Tell me you didn't sign anything," he said. My stomach dropped. "It was just a routine business partnership agreement." Mason said. It wasn't routine. Nate spread the documents across my desk. "This gives him power of attorney over your business assets, and it's dated 3 weeks ago." The room spun. I grabbed the edge of my desk. "That's not what I signed. He showed me something completely different." "Digital document switching." Nate's voice was hollow. "The version you saw isn't the one that got filed." My phone buzzed again. "Mason, let's talk about your options. Dinner at 8? "Don't respond," Grandma Ruth said from the doorway. I hadn't even heard her come in. "He's setting a trap." "I have to do something." My voice cracked. "He could destroy everything I've built." "That's exactly what he wants you to think." She moved to the window, staring out at the gathering dusk. "Fear makes people predictable." My phone lit up with another message, this time from an unknown number. A photo appeared. Security camera footage of Mason entering a law office with a familiar figure. "Is that?" Nate leaned closer. "That's Caroline Weber's father, from 2 days ago." The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. "He's working with them now." "Of course he is," Sam said, striding in with his laptop. "Because Caroline's father just got out of prison, and guess who's helping him rebuild his jewelry empire?" I thought of my client list, my supplier connections, everything Mason had access to through that fraudulent contract. He's going to hand them my entire business infrastructure. "Unless," Nate prompted, "unless I buy him out." The words tasted like ash. That's what this dinner invitation is really about. Grandma Ruth turned from the window. "You're not going." "I have to. If I don't—" "If you do, you'll walk right into his endgame." She gripped my shoulders. "Think, child. Why now? Why partner with the very family he destroyed?" My phone buzzed again. Another photo. Mason with Megan at what looked like a private airport. Today's date stamped in the corner. "He's running," Sam said. "The FBI investigation spooked him. This dinner? It's his last play before he disappears." A final message from Mason appeared. "Tick-tock, sweetheart. Some opportunities only knock once." I looked at the contract spread across my desk, at the carefully crafted web of lies that had nearly snared me. Then at Nate's worried face, Sam's protective stance, Grandma Ruth's knowing eyes. "What if—" My voice strengthened. "What if we let him think he's won?" Nate straightened. "You have a plan. Caroline's father wants revenge on Mason as much as I do." I picked up my phone. "And I'm betting Mason never told him about our little FBI investigation." "A trap within a trap," Sam mused. "Risky." "Everything's risky." I started typing a response to Mason. But Grandma's right. Fear makes people predictable. And right now, Mason's running scared. "Be careful," Grandma Ruth warned. "The cornered wolf bites hardest." I hit send on my reply. 8 o'clock. Let's discuss our future." Mason's response was immediate. "That's my girl. The usual place?" I watched the cursor blink, thinking of Caroline Weber's father, of all the other lives Mason had destroyed, of the shadows Grandma Ruth had seen lurking behind his smile. "Yes," I typed. "Time to finish what we started." Nate touched my arm. "You don't have to do this alone." "I'm not." I looked at my family, my real support system. I never was. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. By 8 o'clock, they'd break. And in their wake, either my business would be in ruins, or Mason would finally face the consequences of his actions. The choice was mine. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't afraid to make it. The restaurant's private dining room felt like a trap, with its dim lighting and closed doors. Mason sat across from me, perfectly composed in his tailored suit, while thunder rumbled outside. The storm had followed me here. "You look tired, sweetheart." He poured wine I hadn't asked for. "Business troubles keeping you up?" I thought of the FBI agent hidden 2 tables away, of Sam watching the back exit, of Nate monitoring every digital transaction from his car. One wrong move could unravel everything. Actually, I pulled out a check. I've decided to accept your investment proposal. His eyes flickered. Surprise, then triumph. I knew you'd see reason. $2 million. I slid the check across the table. In exchange for dissolving our contract, Mason's smile didn't waver, but his fingers tightened around his wine glass. Why the sudden change of heart? Let's call it insurance. I forced myself to meet his gaze. Against any future misunderstandings. The door opened. Caroline Weber's father walked in, right on schedule. Mason's composure cracked for just a second. Mason! Mr. Weber's voice carried years of prison-hardened edge. Quite a coincidence, running into you here. Robert! Mason recovered quickly. I was just discussing business with my fiancé. Ex-fiancé, I corrected. And we were actually discussing your pattern of fraudulent contracts. Mason's charm vanished like smoke. Careful, Lydia. Some doors can't be unclosed. Like the ones to federal prison? Robert Weber pulled out a chair. My daughter sends her regards. This is a private dinner, Mason said through clenched teeth. Not anymore. I nodded toward the window, where Megan Carter's silhouette appeared. Your mother had quite a lot to share about your overseas accounts. Thunder crashed closer. Mason's hand moved toward his jacket pocket, where he'd been keeping a thumb drive with what he thought were my complete business records. It's gone, I said quietly. While you were meeting with Robert yesterday, Nate cleared out your office. Amazing what a federal warrant can accomplish. You're bluffing. But sweat beaded on his forehead. The contract was invalidated the moment you filed fraudulent documents. Robert Weber's smile was shark-like. The FBI is very interested in pattern recognition, Mason. First my family, then Lydia's. Mason stood abruptly, his chair scraping against hardwood. This is harassment. I'm leaving. No, said a new voice. You're not. The FBI agent stepped into view, badge glinting. Behind him, Sam blocked the other exit. Through the window, I saw Nate's car pull up, headlights illuminating Megan Carter as she walked toward the entrance. It's over, Mason. My voice didn't shake. The only question is how many charges you want to face. He laughed, a hollow, dangerous sound. You think this ends here? I've got copies of everything. One phone call, and your entire business infrastructure goes public. Every supplier, every client. Already warned, Nate said, entering with a laptop. They're actually quite interested in testifying about your attempted corporate espionage. Mason's facade finally shattered. The shadows Grandma Ruth had warned about weren't just visible now. They were consuming him, turning his handsome features ugly with rage. You stupid bitch, he snarled. I made you, without me. Without you, I cut him off. I'm exactly what I've always been, a woman who built something real, unlike you. He lunged, not at me, but at the laptop Nate held. Sam moved faster, tackling him before he reached it. The FBI agent stepped in, handcuffs glinting in the lightning flash from outside. Mason Carter, the agent began. You're under arrest for fraud, attempted extortion. I didn't stay to hear the rest. Walking out into the storm felt like breaking through a surface I'd been drowning under. Rain soaked my clothes, but I barely noticed. Grandma Ruth waited by my car, umbrella in hand. The shadows are lifting, she said simply. Not yet. I watched through the window as Mason was led away. There's still the trial, the publicity, the cleanup. But you're not afraid anymore. She squeezed my hand. That's what matters. Lightning split the sky, illuminating Mason's face as he was placed in a police car. For a moment, our eyes met through the rain-streaked glass. I saw no trace of the man I'd thought I loved, only the monster he'd always been. The storm was breaking, and somehow I knew the worst was finally over. The courthouse steps felt endless as I climbed them, each step heavier than the last. Mason's preliminary hearing should have been a victory. Instead, his last words to me in the restaurant haunted every moment. You think this is over? I'm taking everything. I hadn't understood what he meant. Not until now. Nate waited at the top, his face ashen. Lydia, wait. There's something you need to know. But I'd already seen her. Caroline Weber stood by the entrance, her designer outfit a stark contrast to her haunted eyes. Next to her, Mason's mother wrung her hands. He played us all, Caroline said as I approached. Even now, he's still playing us. Inside, my legal team huddled around a stack of documents. Sam paced nearby, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in urgent whispers. The air felt thick with defeat. What happened? My voice sounded distant, even to myself. Mason's lawyers filed a countersuit, Nate explained. He's claiming you orchestrated everything. The fraudulent contracts, the investment schemes, all of it. And he has evidence. That's impossible. But my hands started shaking. The FBI has proof. Fabricated emails, Sam cut in, ending his call. Dating back months. Messages that make it look like you were the mastermind and Mason was trying to stop you. He must have been planning this from the beginning. Caroline stepped forward. He did the same thing to my father, created a paper trail that made him look guilty, while Mason walked away clean. By the time we figured it out, it was too late, Megan Carter finished. I'm so sorry, Lydia. I should have warned you he'd do this. The courtroom doors opened. Mason walked out in handcuffs, flanked by his lawyers. But he was smiling, that same charming smile that had once made me trust him. Last chance, sweetheart, he said softly as they passed. Drop the charges, and maybe your business survives this. My attorney appeared, clutching more papers. Ms. Thompson, we need to discuss options. These allegations, they're incredibly detailed. If they stick, when? Mason called over his shoulder. Not if. I watched him disappear down the hallway, the pieces finally clicking together. Every late-night work session, every time he'd helped with my business records, every moment I'd thought he was supporting my dreams, he'd been building his defense. The suppliers are already pulling out, Nate said quietly. 3 major contracts canceled this morning. Your reputation. Is everything in this business? I finished. The walls seemed to close in. He knew that. He always knew. Grandma Ruth's voice echoed in my memory. The shadows are lifting. But she'd been wrong. The shadows weren't lifting. They were drowning me. We can fight this, Sam insisted. There has to be something. Fight with what? My voice cracked. He's poisoned every relationship I've built. Even if we win, the damage is done. My business, my reputation. Caroline touched my arm. Don't let him win, not again. But Mason had already won. Every careful step I'd taken to expose him had somehow played into his hands. The very evidence I'd gathered against him was being twisted to destroy me instead. My phone buzzed. Another supplier terminating their contract. Then another. And another. Lydia! Nate's voice was desperate. Look at me. We're not done. There's still... Still what? I pulled away from his reach. My life's work is imploding. Everything I built, he's taking it all. Through the courthouse windows, I could see reporters gathering. The story was already spreading. Successful businesswoman exposed as fraudulent schemer. Mason's perfect revenge. I need air, I managed, pushing past everyone. No one tried to stop me. Outside, rain fell again. Or maybe it had never stopped. I stood in it, letting it soak through my court clothes, wondering how I'd missed the truth for so long. Mason hadn't just wanted my money. He'd wanted to destroy me completely. And now, watching my phone light up with more cancellations, more accusations, more evidence of my world crumbling, I realized the true depth of his revenge. He'd made me trust him, love him, believe in our future, all so this moment would hurt more. The shadows hadn't just lingered behind him. They'd been waiting for me all along, and I had walked right into them. 3 days after the courthouse, Nate burst into my workshop, laptop clutched to his chest like a shield. His face held something I hadn't seen in weeks. Hope. We found it, he said, breathless. The real paper trail. I looked up from the half-packed boxes of inventory, all that remained of my business. What are you talking about? Mason's mother. He set the laptop down, hands shaking with excitement. She kept everything. Every email, every transaction, every fake account he created. She's been documenting his schemes for years. The door opened again. Megan Carter walked in, followed by Carolyn Weber and my brother Sam. Each carried folders thick with documents. It wasn't enough to just confess, Megan said quietly. You needed proof. Real proof. My phone buzzed. Mason's number. Right on schedule. He's coming, Sam said, checking his watch. Thinks he's here to negotiate dropping the charges. Are we ready? Caroline asked, her voice steel-edged. The workshop door opened one final time. Mason stepped in, his lawyer conspicuously absent. His smile faltered when he saw the gathering. Well, he drawled, recovering quickly. Quite the reunion. Sit down, Mason. My voice didn't shake, not anymore. I'd rather stand. His eyes narrowed at his mother. Planning another dramatic confession, Mom? No, Megan said, just delivering evidence. Sam moved to block the door. Nate's fingers flew across his keyboard, and suddenly the workshop's walls lit up with projected documents. Years of Mason's carefully hidden paper trail, exposed in glowing detail. Cute presentation, Mason said, but sweat beaded on his forehead. All easily explained. By the secondary email server you kept in Singapore? Nate cut in. The one your mother had access to? Mason's smile vanished. You're bluffing. Like you bluffed about Stanford? Caroline stepped forward. Or about the investment firm you never actually registered? Or about the offshore accounts? I added, watching his facade crack. The ones you used to destroy Caroline's family before targeting mine? Everything you built, Megan said softly, was built on lies I helped you maintain. Not anymore. Mason's charm disappeared entirely, replaced by something cold and dangerous. You really want to play this game? Fine, release those documents. Watch your precious reputation burn with mine. My reputation? I laughed. Actually laughed. You already destroyed that. But here's what you didn't count on. I don't care anymore. His confidence wavered. What? You can have my reputation, my business, all of it. I stepped closer, because unlike you, I can build something real again, something honest. With what? He sneered. Your suppliers are gone. Your clients are right here, Caroline interrupted, pulling out her phone. Every family you've destroyed over the years. We've been talking, planning, building something new. Understanding dawned in Mason's eyes as Nate projected more documents, business plans, partnership agreements, signatures from dozens of Mason's former victims. A network, Sam explained, of people who know exactly who you are, what you do, how you operate. And this time, Megan added, we have proof. Mason lunged for the laptop, but I was ready. My hand caught his wrist, the same way he'd once held mine, while sliding on that engagement ring. The FBI already has everything, I said quietly. Every document, every scheme, every victim's statement. It's over. You're lying, but his voice cracked. No, Mason. For once, someone in this room is telling the truth. The workshop door opened one final time. The FBI agent from the restaurant stepped in, followed by two others. Mason Carter, he began. But Mason was already running, straight into Sam's waiting grip. As they led him away, I saw what Grandma Ruth had warned me about all those months ago. The shadows behind him weren't just visible now. They were dissolving, exposed to the light of truth. Lydia, he called back, desperate. Don't do this. We can still. No, I cut him off. We can't. Because you never saw me clearly. You saw a target, a means to an end. But I see you, Mason. Finally, I see you completely. The door closed behind him. In the sudden quiet, I felt something shift, not just in the room, but in myself. The weight of his deception lifted, replaced by something stronger. The truth. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I could breathe again. The courtroom emptied slowly after Mason's sentencing, but I stayed rooted to my seat, watching him being led away. 15 years. Not for what he'd done to me, but for all the others before me. The shadows had finally caught up with him. Ready to go? Nate's voice was gentle beside me. Almost. I touched the empty space on my finger where the engagement ring had been. It doesn't feel real yet. Outside, autumn sunlight painted the courthouse steps gold. Caroline Weber waited with a group of Mason's other victims, now my business partners. Their chatter about our new venture carried on the breeze. The Weber-Thompson Collective, Sam mused, joining us, has a nice ring to it. Better than Victims Anonymous, Caroline called over, making everyone laugh. Megan Carter approached hesitantly, clutching her purse. The others fell quiet. Saya, I've been thinking, she said, about shadows, about how they grow longer when we feed them with silence. Mom? The word slipped out before I could stop it. These past months, she'd become something between a confessor and a surrogate mother. She pressed something into my hand, a small velvet pouch. The diamonds he stole from Caroline's family. I've been keeping them safe, waiting for the right moment. Caroline's breath caught. Those were my grandmother's. And now they're yours again. I passed her the pouch. Maybe we can make something new from them. Something honest. Speaking of new beginnings, Grandma Ruth's voice carried from the courthouse doors. She descended the steps slowly, that knowing smile playing at her lips. I had another dream last night. Grandma, please, I laughed. No more prophecies. Not a prophecy, a certainty. She pointed toward the street. Like that. A dog, scraggly and thin, trotted up the courthouse steps. It headed straight for me, tail wagging hopefully. He's been hanging around all morning, Sam said. No collar, no chip, according to the security guard. The dog pressed against my legs, looking up with eyes that seemed to know everything I'd been through. Without thinking, my hand found his head. See? Grandma Ruth's eyes twinkled. The shadows lift, light returns, and sometimes it brings unexpected gifts. Nate knelt beside me, offering the dog his hand to sniff. He needs a home. We all do, Megan said softly. That's why we're here. My phone buzzed. Another supplier, but not with a cancellation. An order, a big one. The first of many, according to Caroline's business plan. The thing about shadows, Grandma Ruth mused, watching the dog lean into my touch, is that they can't exist without light. Mason cast a long one, but he couldn't dim your shine. Not really. The dog's tail thumped against the courthouse steps. Nate's hand found mine, warm and steady. Around us, my unlikely family of survivors talked about future plans, new beginnings, ways to help others spot the shadows before they grew too dark. You knew, didn't you? I asked Grandma Ruth. Not just about Mason, but about all of this. I knew you'd find your way through. She squeezed my shoulder. The how of it. That was all you. The dog whined, drawing my attention back. In the sunlight, his coat wasn't scraggly at all. Just different, unique. Like he'd weathered his own storms before finding his way here. What should we call him? Nate asked. Phoenix, Caroline suggested. Because he rose from nowhere, just like we will. Too obvious, Sam countered. What about Shadow, I said quietly. Because now we know. They're nothing to be afraid of. Not when you face them together. The dog's tail wagged faster, like he approved. Above us, clouds shifted, changing the patterns of light and shadow on the courthouse steps. But I wasn't watching the shadows anymore. I was watching the people who'd helped me step out of them. My phone buzzed again. Another order, another chance to build something real. Shadow pressed against my legs. Nate's hand squeezed mine, and Grandma Ruth's knowing smile said everything words couldn't. The shadows would always be there. But now I knew. They were just proof of how brightly the light could shine.